like this really like beautiful album that's really high concept. There's a lot of visuals around it. Like it's clear that like the world of the Wasteland is very like intense. So I'd love for you to start by just sharing a little bit about the concept of the album as a whole and what you were trying to accomplish with it creatively.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, a lot of it was written by Steve, and it was a large conversation that we just had, obviously, before the writing process started, so about a year or so after Eulogies, and, I guess we were just trying to, like, think outside the box, and, like, we just can't, like, Steve, like, pitched the idea of, like, doing a concept album, and just, like, trying to figure out, like, actually telling, like, a story, and, like, world building, and, like, doing all these different things, and it's really beautiful the way that it turned out, because it like actually just kind of like expanded and grew into this story with Jess, and like his eyes kind of being opened to the to the sickness and like to the like depravity of the Wasteland, and just that like he's starting to slowly like put things together, and you get to see a little bit of that in like their Parasite music video, and like some of the little bits and teaser, or little bits and pieces in the teasers, and just getting to like have a perspective through Jess's eyes of this like just chaotic post-apocalyptic wasteland, is just really interesting, and just in the light of like what the gospel says about our hearts and our nature, as a whole, so it's just like translating that into something that's like tangible for people, and like following a character's story, and like, viewing the parasite like as the sickness in us, sin sickness and all of the, it's just like, just such a unique and interesting way that I think that we've developed in like just the ability to tell a story in general, that I think people have been really like have gravitated towards, which is really awesome, because like I know there's 1,000,001 different like stories like that out there, but I truly think that like putting our creative spin on it has definitely been something people have really liked. So it's been really awesome. And there's tons more to explore. There's like it's a whole world.
I do feel like, sort of speak to that your sort of storytelling capacity as a band is just like expanded so tremendously with this album, and each individual song really sort of lends itself to that. But in this context, I'd love to hear if there's like a particular song that you feel like really speaks to mental health, and the sort of like things that people might struggle with when they are in their personal wastelands, as we all are, right? So.
Absolutely. Really, I mean, the song that I gravitate towards, in that space really is like, it's definitely not like a pretty song by any means, or like super emotional, but it's very to the point as Parasite, and Parasite talks about like the sickness that is that like infests us essentially, and that like warps our mind, and that literally like tears us from end to end, that like goes in and just tells us lies, and just tells us things that are not true, or things that just like obviously like is not what we would think in the forefront of our mind about ourselves, about others, and that really resonates with me too, because like I'm definitely guilty of like being inside of my own head constantly, like all the time, just about everything. And I think that's when you feel the true weight of life, and just like the day to day, it's really easy to start to pick yourself apart and just try to like figure that out. And that is that sickness, that is that the parasite feeds upon my open veins. Like it continues to grow, and like we all know very well like how easy it is for that like snowball effect to happen. Is like all it takes is one thought, and it really just like spirals down,
What will you say to somebody who's in one of those spirals? Because you're right, like we all so easily fall into just sort of those like avalanche moments where like a thought picks up speed and then just takes us out. So for like you as a person or as a band, what would you speak to somebody who is in the middle of that and just wants to find a way to stop the spiral? My biggest thing from personal experience is that I have struggled so hard in asking for help. Like I'm really bad at that, like genuinely.
And when you're so isolated and you're so like distant from people, because it is so easy to draw away from people when you're in that space, that I would say, number one, that you are loved more than you could ever comprehend, and like more than you could ever fathom, truly. And that number two is that you are absolutely not alone. Like, there are so many others like you that are going through, probably, crazy enough, almost the exact same thing that you're going through, or at least something similar. And how that relates to me is that, like, my wife being like the most perfect example is because, like, all she wants to do is help. So like when I'm going through something like that and I'm truly struggling mentally, like, I have to teach myself and force myself to reach out to people, because, like, whether you think it's the end or not, I promise you it's not. There is always a way out. That, giving up is never the answer, ever. There is always somebody, there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. There is always something there that somebody's going to hold your hand and somebody's going to come to you and can meet you where you are, because I know life can feel overwhelming, and I know just the struggles of the day-to-day of just existence in general can feel very, very daunting. But that's why, like, I love the metal community. That's why I love music is such a insanely beautiful catalyst for people. Is that, like, this festival is a perfect example. Is that, like, all of these different people of so many different walks of life are coming into one place to listen to their favorite band. Like, that is such a crazy concept. I've met, like, between bands and fans and all these other people, like, I've probably met people from like 16 different countries today. You know what I mean? Like, because they're all coming to one place to, like, to unify and to, like, listen to some awesome music and actually truly have a wonderful experience. So I would say, yeah, like, find others like you. Find it, because I guarantee you there's plenty of them.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like you probably have such perspective on that, like we were talking about earlier, kind of having been around as a band now for 15 years. I'd be curious to hear how your perspective on communicating this message that you're loved, that you're not alone, has shifted and changed after 15 years in the industry. Kind of like where you're at right now as a band. Mm-hmm. What does it feel like to be communicating that? What feels really important in how you communicate that? And what is your experience of the music community now, after having just, like, been through, again, sort of the long haul?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually just, very similar. It's been the same philosophy, like, the entire time that we've been a band. In just that, like, being purposeful and being, like, intentional about reaching out and, like, using music as that catalyst that just says, like our song Relief, we wrote that's from our record in 5x5. We wrote that song, oh my gosh, like 8 years ago or so now. You know what I mean? Like literally throughout the, like, almost half the band's life cycle at the, to this point. And that was literally like, to the point, a message about hope and a message about, like, not feeling alone or you feeling alone and feeling overwhelmed, is that saying that, like, come and find your rest, like, come and find that. And that's, like, that hope, because we also share the gospel through our music as well. So, like, finding that message of hope in who Christ is, in who, others in the same community that you're in, and just like really just reaching out and just saying something. Like, I know that's tough. I like, again, personal experience. I know it's tough, especially when you feel isolated. But, like, you wouldn't believe the kinds of things that you will learn about other people that make you feel so connected to others. And that, again, that's why I love music. I love the metal, the hardcore scene. I love music because it is probably the most beautiful way that people have been connected together and all say, yeah, I feel the exact same way you do. And that it's kind of like an anthem effect, in that way. So, music is just beautiful in that way.
Yeah, man, I feel like that's so well said, and it's so accurate. That there's something just so beautiful and special about this community and the connection. And it's cool that you're sort of finding your rhythm with that, and you're deeper than ever before. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear, just sort of in closing, what are you looking forward to? Like, you have all of this behind you. You've got, like, a new record that's really beautiful and concept heavy, and your best storytelling yet under your belt. But looking ahead, what are you really, like, excited about, looking forward to in terms of what you want to communicate or the space that you're in as a musician?
Yeah, I mean, you know, being here at Rockville and playing, you know, just even in the, you know, what I felt like, you know, this in comparison to the other bands, you know, the small capacity that we did, just getting to see so many different people that we haven't before, you know, and that we're still, you know, meeting new fans and getting to like reach people on different levels is so insane. Like I had a guy come up to me and say like, dude, I was just passing by and I heard you said it was so sick, like you definitely got a new listener out of me, man. You know, like just those random encounters, like I want more of those. Like I want more exciting, you know, adventures on tour where they like where we get to meet people like that. Is like, dude, I don't know who the heck you are, but like this is awesome, you know. And you know, getting more awesome opportunities like this to play at festivals with like so many other people that are just like us, you know, and just like really feeling that, yeah, that sense of community. You know, and I know we've traveled around the world before. We've traveled UK, Canada, you know, Germany, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, hopefully we get to kind of expand that into other countries as well, and man, just having a joyful heart the entire way. So
yeah. Man, I love that. Is there any kind of like final parting words that you would want to offer to somebody who's in like a really deep place to struggle with their mental health right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being someone who has literally fought for his own life and had others fight for my life in a very visceral manner, and something that I'll never forget. I can't say it enough. Like you're not alone. There are so many people out there that are going through a very similar situation that you're going through, and you wouldn't believe the kind of connectivity that you would have with others, just even in the same vicinity as you. Like it's just truly wild how much you would have in common with someone else than you really would think. So I would say that, given all of the struggles that I've personally been through mentally, that quitting is the worst thing that you could do. And like, I would strongly urge you, I would pray that you would reach out to someone at work, someone at your home, your mom or your dad, a friend, a relative, even somebody you met at a show, you know, funny enough, you know, like that. When it comes to brass, like when it comes down to it, like we are here for each other. Like we are here to support one another. We are here to like just have a good time and to like you said, build that community. So yeah, I would pray that you would see that this is not the end, and that again that you would know that there is a love so far greater and so far unimaginable that you could ever see, and that it is here for you. And that it is for you, it is made for you, and that you're the object of that love.
Mic drop moment. I feel like that ends us on like the perfect landing place. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. No, I feel like again, it's just such a good fit because your music has always dealt with like the deep and the gritty and the real and the hard. And, again, life's wastelands and the sickness.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to have this chat. And
yeah, me too.
I know like it's going to be something that will really resonate with people who get to like
awesome.
Like hear this.
Yeah, that's always my hope. Yeah, I always want to produce, you know, all of us in the band. Like, I mean, I always want all of us to produce the most authenticity, the most genuine, just like because it is who we are. Like that's just what we do. Like I'm very thankful that it is just a part of like the personality of the band. You know, that's not. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I think you do that very well.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.